Welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast, where we will discuss how to defer taxes on the sale of your property, earning passive real estate income, and everything you need to know to go from active investor to passive investor. Join us as we interview passive investment sponsors, explore the journey of other retiring real estate investors, and share our due diligence process we perform to select passive investments. Investment advisory services provided by Insight Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is only intended for clients and interested investors residing in the states in which we are registered to provide investment advisory services or exempt from registration. Please contact us to determine if the firm provides investment advisory services in the state where you reside. All content on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Material presented is believed to be reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to another party's informational accuracy or completeness. Insight Investment Advisors, LLC and its representatives do not provide tax or legal advice, and nothing herein should be construed as such. Always consult with your tax advisor or attorney regarding your specific circumstances. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Bruckman. I'm honored to be joined by Bill Wester from Victory Title. Bill, how are you?
Hanging in, bud. Glad to be here.
It's awesome. Yeah, we're struggling our way through an early morning here a little bit after a long weekend, but we're gonna make it. We'll be okay.
Time change got you.
Yeah, not to date ourselves, but yes, someday. I know this is passed through Congress. We're gonna eliminate this time change thing. So
have to.
Here's
eventually.
To that. Bill, maybe start us off and talk to us a little bit about Victory Title, about the company, and maybe a little bit of your background.
Sure. Victory Title has a good, solid foothold on market. We've been in business now since September of 22. So we're a new company to the market, but our crew is very experienced. I myself have been doing this almost 29 years. Our examiners over 21 years, and our head of production, Joe, actually has 7 years. We have 3 other staff members that are all fairly new, but they are very, very closely managed and are great assistants, and they're tooled very well. They have all the right technology in front of them. They have all the resources that they could think of. We typically don't leave any stones unturned. That's why we're getting such good traction in the market. The company is very client-centric, which means that your customers, when a realtor, a lender, or an investor brings their client to us, their client is going to be treated like gold. We may have to beat up on the realtor or the lender or the investor a little bit just to make sure that everything is in line, because they want it to be in line, because the end all be all is a clean, clear close. And that's what we provide.
That's perfect. Talk to me a little bit about some of the things you want to talk about today. And I thought this was very interesting and timely and appropriate for our audience. Investor-friendly title service. Talk to us a little bit about how do you make that investor-friendly?
Well, multiple ways, but one of the big things is encumbrances on title. You'll find that most investors are taking on property or finding property and creating subject to. So they're subject to a mortgage, subject to some exceptions, subject to taxes, and we try and resolve all those issues in advance of a close. If they're not solved or resolved, we can't close. And investors like it when they can count on quick process. We turn the average order around in 24 to 48 hours on examining. For a standard title company, that might be 48 to 72, maybe even 7 days. But we're much quicker because of our proficiencies and knowledge base. We have a lot of access, and we pay for this access. We have a lot of access that other title companies don't perceive as useful, so they don't use them. And they're broad and varied, so it's a little difficult to get into the minutia there. But at a granular level, from a investor's perspective, we have everything lined up, that old fashioned ducks in a row. We have all of the digital signing, RON, which is remote online notary. We can do 1031 exchanges. Very solid with that. We actually are used to working with LLCs on a regular basis. So when we ask you for LLC information and you provide it, we can then move forward quickly. And the bottom line is speed and efficiency. From the moment we get an order, it's responded to via email. We'll confirm that your order has been received almost within minutes of receiving that email. We also have a web portal which will allow you to place orders and check rates. As you probably already know, rates for title in Wisconsin are promulgated, which means that's all going to be the same. We're going to be within pennies to dollars of any other title company. So what matters is the level of service, the quality of service, the speed of service, the efficiency of service. And we carry all those buckets of water very, very effectively.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's huge for the investor to have speed and efficiency here. What are those other keys that folks should be looking for in a title company? It's customer service, speed and efficiency. What else? What else should our investors be thinking about as they're choosing a title company?
The biggest factor that always gets kind of ignored is communication. The number of times we answer emails and or calls for a single transaction can range from 12 to 130 and everywhere in between. But the key is that we do communicate, and we tend to over communicate, especially with challenging lenders. And there are lenders from all over the country that we've worked with. And in many, many, many cases, those lenders don't understand the market in Wisconsin. Those lenders follow different rules, different regulations, and different laws. So we have to impart on them the right information so that everything's done correctly for Wisconsin law. We're not lawyers. We don't offer any type of legal advice, but we know what's right and what's wrong. We know what's correct, what's allowed, what isn't allowed. So we follow those rules, and best practices lead us to winning a great deal of business.
Is that a tough line to draw? I think about a lot of our experience and background and time that we spend in this process is with a qualified intermediary in the 1031 exchange process. And we find value there when, of course, they're not lawyers or CPAs either, but as you said, they know what's right. Is that a tough line to sort of walk? Because you don't want to be perceived as giving legal advice, but you see clear things that are wrong and you're going to give that feedback. Is that a tough line to kind of, are you dancing a line there a little bit of being a lawyer or not being a lawyer at that point? Or how do you guys think about it?
Well, the nice thing is that our licensure provides for the fact that we do offer a legal service. It's just limited. It's extremely limited. And that's fine by me. Yeah. I most of the time, if we have an intermediary involved, we just rely on what they're going to tell us, even if they tell us something that's incorrect, because it's their licensure and insurance that's on the line. When we run into a scenario where there might be an ethical boundary, disclosure. We don't move off of disclosure. Everyone that's in the transaction, every party to the transaction will have full disclosure on the transaction. We don't bend that rule ever. That actually leads to people walking away smiling. Yeah. When your clients walk away smiling, that's the key of the whole thing. We dread that call back, a month later, 2 months later. Hey, this isn't right. Unfortunately, we get very, very few of those. And we're super well insured. We look out for the best interests of our clients first and foremost.
Absolutely. On that point, one of the topics you wanted to run through a little bit was around consumer protection. I was trying to think about how to
Yeah.
think about that, but I'd rather have you tell me. How should I think about that?
Well, you remember we talked a little bit about promulgation of the
Mm-hmm.
rates in 2013. The state and Wisconsin Land Title Association, ALTA, American Land Title Association, worked hand in hand with legislators to promulgate rates, straighten them out. And what it stopped was the odd competitive, hey, I'm going to charge a quarter less for this. I'm going to charge $1 more for this. It stopped a lot of that. So now we're all on the same page. So what comes out of it is who's the best servicer? Who's the most responsive? Who's the quickest? Who's the most efficient? All those adjectives that you can think of. With consumer protection or CFPB regulation, we have to pay attention to what the client wants. We very often, as title companies, pursue realtors, lenders, and investors directly. Mm-hmm. Investors directly is a fairly simple task. We just need to satisfy their needs. Lenders and realtors are what are considered customers, not clients. And we need to meet their expectations as well, specifically lender instruction on closings. And for the client, we need to communicate efficiently and deliver the end result, the closing, very efficiently as well. The key to it is the consumer gets to decide what's what. So when realtors have invested time in a good title company, and there's a bunch of good title companies in Milwaukee, or a lender has the same, they have a relationship with a couple of different, or really just a few different title companies, they tend to direct business that way. Directed business isn't lawful. We can't legitimately do that. I'm a former licensed broker in Wisconsin for real estate, and I understand all those rules, regulations, guidelines. What they end up doing is they end up recommending a title company and or closing infrastructure through an attorney to their clients, and we follow them typically. There's a point where or an inflection where the title company needs to be really courteous and careful with that relationship that realtor and or lender has built, because what a lot of people don't know, especially those that are not in the industry, realtors and lenders work unbelievably hard, and I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, title entities work very hard too. We burn the candle at both ends. We're not unfamiliar with 60, 70 week hours of work. But realtors and lenders, they're kind of a 27, 27, or rather 24-hour, 7-day a week scenario. They are answering calls at 9 o'clock at night. They're answering calls and showing houses on Sundays. Yeah. It's that is kind of why when you have a realtor or a lender who's been doing it a while, they're a little more savvy, and they've got some juice. I mean, they're tough, leather skin. And we really work to try and help them maintain, because we know that if we take great care of their clients, they're going to recommend us over and over and over. It's not an easy thread to pull, but we dance pretty carefully and take care of all parties.
I'm surprised to hear about. I'm learning a lot here. I'm surprised to hear about the regulations in the space, and so the uniformity that's been driven on price, and the way you approach that from a business standpoint. Is that similar in other states? Do you have insight in that, or is that are we being with special Wisconsin people here?
Yeah, well,
we are special Wisconsin people.
We are
but in this aspect, are we being special?
Yeah. Great question. There are 36 states that are similar to Wisconsin. The coasts do not follow a lot of our regulations. Facts being what they are, and what we see on a regular basis, we deal with a lot of California investor type lenders. And one of the important things that a lot of consumers don't know is that if you're pulling in a lender from out of state, you want them to be an MNLS certified or regulated lender, because you're going to be safer. You're going to be under that umbrella. It's not necessarily an insurance thing. It's just a knowledge-based thing, and they have to communicate that information freely. They can't not. So if someone is not an MLS registered lender, then you might question it. I'm sure they won't want to hear that, but it's a slippery slope. You get into the lenders that cost us money rather than help us earn something. Recent example is we had 136 separate auditable communications with a single lender for $130,000 transaction. So when you look at a title company's profit margin, you get that many communications back and forth, and we have to. The stability thing here is that, and why we're stable is we read every detail. We don't leave stuff out. And when we get like an automated or an AI email set up from a lender, those AIs are extremely repetitive, and they come out in a couple different formats from different departments from the same lender. So it's like dealing with a portal full of communication rather than streamlined communication. On the lender end, they like it because they don't have to do anything. On the title end, or on the realtor end, or the client end, it's a bit cumbersome. Yes. So when you've got a company like us who's dealt with this many times, we can accommodate. Makes it a little easier. Yeah.
Interesting. We are learning a lot. I want to hit some of the other topics you want to talk about. Closings. Where do you want to take us there? You got closing horror stories you want to tell us?
There are, I can tell you an ancient one. Way back in the day, we had, and I was with a different title company then, we had a transaction in northern part of the state. I won't say the town, but the people that bought the property years before, everything closed clean, ancient property. And when they went to build, excavators do something, or the surveyors and excavators do something called a pentrometer test. They call it a pentrometer because it actually physically looks a little bit like a pen. And then the end of it is designed to be pressed into the soil and give the reader of the device a determination of whether or not the soil is firm enough to put a footing on. Well, they dug down. Excavator thought he was Jed Clampett. I'm dating myself, but moved to Beverly, it struck oil, but it wasn't oil. It was creosote. The property 100 years ago, when they were putting the railroad through, had a portion of the property where a creosote pond had been built to soak the ties so that they could further the rail. That happened all over the country. It's not an uncommon thing. It is kind of uncommon to find them now, but they managed to find it, put their thumb right on the right treasure, and because they were insured with a proper title policy, they didn't lose anything. It became a claim, and of course EPA had to go in and examine it, and it had to be cleaned and moved on from there. But that's an instance where title served its purpose, because title is a little different than like auto insurance. Auto insurance is all about contingency. What's going to happen? This was kind of a what's going to happen, but it was also we insure against what's already happened.
Yeah.
So when you move into history and something happens later on, it can be sorted out. We saw one just about a decade ago in Milwaukee where the remains were found during a it was in a backyard, I believe.
Yep.
And they turned out to be Native American remains, and that needed to be handled extraordinarily carefully.
Yeah.
It made national news. It was an interesting thing, and the title company that had covered that actually was able to cover the claim. So claim rates are usually very low for title companies because we are so careful. Our search and examining process is triple fold. We have 3 different people involved, and the 2 owners of the company, myself and my partner, were able to double check that information on the fly as they develop it. And we also go through the file from beginning to end, making sure that each element is accommodated for. There's a lot of other little details that go into finishing a transaction. There's, especially in Milwaukee, there's Department of Neighborhood Services. There's water, taxes. Everything has to be prorated properly. We also have to make sure that our closing fees and costs are either passed through or directly competitive with the rest of the market. And we do. We're pretty aggressive about that. So end result is smiling people walking out the door.
That's what we want. We want closed transactions that lead to smiles, don't we?
Absolutely.
That's what we're after. That's what we're after. Learning a lot here. What haven't we discussed that you really want to hit on?
Well, market seems to have a bit of a stall, and that's, a lot of people get real hung up on, the doom and gloom. As a professional marketing and sales guy, I've always thought that the best time to be in the roles that we're in is when things are down. It gives us an opportunity to adjust and accommodate for change. There's a lot of people in our industry that don't like change. They fight it. One of the keys to being a great title company like Victory Title is to be adaptable so that we can overcome those changes and adapt to the new environment as it comes. These higher rates are causing some lenders some fits. Some of the credit ratings now that they're pulling in, people are trying to get loans and they're not taking care of their credit, so they have to go through some adjustments there. And we just don't want to relive another scenario like 2008-9. It's we'll have something similar to that, I think, but the number of foreclosures will be far fewer than they were. A little bit of history on me. I came from a couple of different title companies. I used to run a group for lawyers title in the state, and about a $490 million division. And we were taking market share like crazy when the bubble hit. Bubble hit and took everybody's jobs away. So I ended up working for Hudson Chase on a project for foreclosure as a consultant. That took the better part of 2 years, and we went through almost 500,000 loans to fix them. Had a whole staff of newly recruited attorneys right out of school that were getting some experience, and we put them through the ringer, and they did a great job. That was a battle. That whole thing, trying to categorize and source out what was wrong with each loan and why it was in our hands. And then we had to look at every single document for every single loan. On a lot of robo-signing issues, on a lot of inappropriate or unethical appraisals, broken title where they should not have closed ever because it was broken. But we went through them and fixed them, and then had to go through the process of marketing those properties nationally. It was a lot of work. A lot of good people. After that, worked for a couple of different title firms as an independent contractor. And then along that way, kind of became a landlord.
Oh,
Not by default, but really had to dig in and find out how I was going to retire, and managed to pull in some properties, and going to do a lot more of that in the future.
okay.
And we have so many good investor clients now that all we see is cool properties, neat stuff that they're pulling in, whether they're doing wraparound mortgages or assignments or A to B, B to C closes. That's another thing that's a tough area. You got to be really, really, as a title professional, you have to be really resilient about A to B, B to C. Have you heard that term before?
No, describe that.
So person A needs to sell their property. They're not in a favorable position financially to maintain the property, or they just want out, or it's an heir that owns the property and they want out. So the investor makes an offer, and then the investor goes out and finds a buyer on his side. So he becomes the buyer in the middle, and then sells to his buyer at the end for more. He makes profit in the middle. Before, when I was saying disclosure, that's one of the types of transactions that requires massive disclosure. Everyone in the transaction, every party, has to be fully informed as to what's going to happen with the transaction, so that first user, the first owner, knows exactly what the middleman is going to earn by selling that property to their buyer. But that type of service is kind of rudimentary. It's necessary so that people can get out from under, because they might have, most of these folks that are in that situation or find themselves in a situation of wanting to do an assigned sale or an A to B, B to C. They don't have the resources, knowledge, or information to finish that or complete it without help. And those that help should be paid.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. In some states, I mean, it's wholesaling in essence, correct?
Yep, it is to a degree. There's
in some states, I believe that's illegal. Don't know. Not as well versed in the law. Is that accurate?
There are a lot of people out there that would like to not disclose, because they don't want their seller that's selling to them to know what they're going to earn on the other end. We can't do that. That is not lawful, and we won't play that. It's just not worth. It's just not worth the stress or the frustration. When you have, like, for instance, we have a form that we use in every single transaction, a full disclosure form, and even if our investor client is trying to do that, it's undone by making sure that the buyers and sellers all see the disclosures 100%. If they don't, you can find yourself in a lot of hot water. And there used to be some title firms out there that really kind of, they play that game and not disclose. We plan on being around for a very long time, and we enjoy what we do, and we're pretty damn good at it. So we're very much about disclosure.
What happens when, on that regulation point a little bit, because we seem to have a well-regulated space, what becomes the penalty? And I'm thinking about this from, you're talking to a registered investment advisor. So
yeah,
compliance and regulation around us is heavy, and similar to you, we welcome it. We sign up to be a fiduciary and live at the highest standard. We're okay with that. What becomes, and well aware of the penalties when you don't on our side, what becomes of, say, a title company when they're not doing, for example, that disclosure? What becomes the typical penalties, fines? How does that sort of stuff out?
Excellent question. There's the regulation is set up to really set people aside if they're not behaving the way they should. You can, because Wisconsin, as intermediary, we do have the ability to be a fiduciary, and we can write checks, accept checks. Everything's in a trust account, like a real estate professional firm, a firm that has multiple trust accounts, as we do. You can lose your individual license. Now, Wisconsin doesn't require the business to have a license other than your LLC or your Inc. or your S corp. But you can lose your ability to practice individually, and that's major. Fines are variable, and I'm pretty sure they range all the way up to $5,000-$10,000 for violations. You can also lose your license permanently for failure to comply. The state is actually really good at monitoring that. They take complaints really well. They manage complaints really well. That's not always the case in every state, but our Department of Financial Institutions is built of some very competent people, and they tend to. What's really cool is when you call them and ask, they answer their phone. Yeah, it's a little different than other government entities. They answer their phone, and you can ask them just about anything, and they'll help you. It's very good for consumer protection. It's very good for entities that want to do things square and straight. The number of questions that we get on a regular basis from new investors is vast, and they're always trying to slip the system. They're always trying to get away with something. But once they get used to a certain methodology or a process, and they have a good backer, they have somebody that can close their transactions carefully, they get a little more comfortable. And then they start to instruct others, and then they coach, and we help those people too. It's almost like dealing with a group of for sale by owner folks. Everybody's got their idea, and that's another area where we shine. For sale by owner. A lot of people like the thought of showing and selling their home on their own, but they don't know how to get it closed. So we have a lot of facilitation of training for those folks. It's almost like doing a Title 101 level course for people who are selling on their own. What's interesting though is that about 50% of them end up with a realtor.
Yeah, exactly right. They see the it's the people on the other end of the spectrum that really don't want to or don't need to sell fast and are utilizing the wholesalers. The other side of that is our folks that want to do for sale by owner and then forget that there is value in having a broker and a third party there to market, sell, and close your home. I certainly use them when I want to sell. When I want to sell property. There's value there in doing that. I get the mentality of doing it yourself, but it's especially if you're one time or two time seller here, like just please pay somebody to help you execute this transaction. They're worth their weight in gold, right?
It's interesting because they got a ton of for sale by owners stories, but it's very common for them to overprice their property because they're emotionally connected. And they can't separate themselves from it should just have a price and move on, because the next one will be the same. You'll get emotionally connected to that one too. We don't mind being a resource. One of the elements that is really important for sale by owner folks is getting questions answered and getting them answered correctly. When we go through for instance, my partner Joe, the guy is a technician. I mean, he is technically extraordinarily sound. He always gets the details done right. There's no such thing as perfection in any business, but we aim at it every day.
Yeah.
It's like that old Vince Lombardi thing. If you chase perfection, you'll find excellence. So we really do chase it. And he's really good at it. So the FSBOs, they get a different level of attention frequently. And we understand that some of their questions are going to be or seem like they're silly.
Yeah.
But we still have to answer them with a little bit of dignity. We practice kindness, especially with FSBOs.
It's an understanding of where they're coming from, right? Like, I would imagine that they could have a very horrible experience at a title company that was annoyed by their presence and the lack of a broker, making their life harder as a title company. Could be irritating and then leads to poor service. We experience this all the time because the majority of our investors that are looking to 1031 exchange, get passive, do the Delaware statutory trust thing, have never done any of these things before. Or the last time I did a 1031 exchange was 35 years ago. And they call it a Starker. And they were like, what's
Starker exchange?
Starker things again? Right. And so we're coaching every single one of our clients through this process front to back. Like, well, here's what to expect. Here's how we need to set this up. Here's your timelines. Here's what happens after we close. And here's how we identify. And to kind of walk them through that process is something that we're doing every time because we know the angle they're coming from. They haven't done this before, or they haven't done this in 30 years. We're gonna have to be patient. So for the rudimentary questions we get, we know what they are.
Yeah.
All right. We'll take them all.
They always seem to get the 80 and 145 day thing. That's fairly easy to kind of unravel for them. What I've found is that some of them get really wrapped up in the like kind property. Does it have to be the same price? Does it have to be exactly the same number? Do I have to replace the same kind of single with another single? And they get tied up in that knot, and getting them out of that knot, especially when they're on the phone and they're not in front of you, that's a little challenging at times. But we just trudge on through and explain it infinitum. And if we do a good job, they'll understand. If we do a mediocre job, they'll ask again, and then they'll ask again. And then we discover we're not doing a good job explaining this.
Yeah, when you ask the same question 3 times, it's like I've failed in my response. The big one we see on the 1031 exchange is the reinvestment, and especially if there's debt on that relinquished property, that gets tricky for folks. Like, well, wait a second, I paid off the debt. No, you pay off the debt with the proceeds. Like, you need to recreate that. Like, what? I just can't.
Yeah,
I just can't invest the game or what's in my QI account. Like, no, we can't do that. We need a little bit more. Like,
yeah, it's that whole float over.
Yeah,
getting to the next one, floating it over. Lenders don't like it either. They tend to fall apart at the seams if you got a newer lender. This means what? I have to add this to what? Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
But
it's an exchange, even though it looks like a buy and sell. In the eyes of IRS, we're just trading. We're exchanging.
Yep.
Like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's in the name.
Every time I see a 1031, I always wonder, how did they get into this scenario? Who told them to get involved in a 1031, especially if it's a tiny, tiny little set of properties. 1031 rather than leverage seems overdone.
Yeah. We've gone through this process with a variety of folks where we ask them, what's your tax liability? And they don't know the answer to that. And well, let's maybe take a step back for a second. And maybe if you have a CPA, it's a good time to have a conversation and say, what if I don't exchange? What's my liability? And lo and behold, a handful of those folks we find, it's like, oh, wait a second, I have these other offsets over here. Or, I have a tax bill, but it's minor compared to the rest of my financial scenario. Like, well, then you don't need to do a 1031 exchange. As much as I'd like you to for my own personal interest, you don't need to. So don't put yourself through this hassle. Instead, decide to do something else. Yeah, it's a missing point for a lot of folks. I think the mindset is, I don't want to pay a dime taxes period. And I get it. But
you guys ever do with your investment side? Do you guys ever do cost segregation studies.
Oh yeah.
Help.
I mean, that's key. Yeah, that's pretty key. I mean, for us, people that hit our desk are people that have made a fundamental decision that they want to be passive. And so they want out.
Yep.
And so the cost seg helps them on the passive next investment. But for folks that want to stay in the game, yeah, I mean, with last year of, I think it's 80% in the bonus depreciation and then the cost seg, you can produce a surprising amount of losses in year one if you have the right tax status. Is that where you're going to on that? Whereas you can nullify the value of doing the 1031.
Yeah, it not only nullify it, if you do it wrong, you could end up upside down.
Yeah.
Especially like in commercial real estate, the commercial retail, big buildings. It's a whole new place to fall apart. I mean, when you look at stuff like the Sears Tower / Willis Tower being 40% vacant in Chicago, that's a little shocking. That's first time in history.
Yeah.
And it's all kind of a residual effect of the pandemic. I don't know if you call it plandemic or pandemic, but it's kind of a residual effect of that. I don't know if the efficiencies of working from home for a lot of companies exist in reality. You hear people talk about it being a reality, but our business is office bound.
Yeah.
So we don't work remotely. We have the capability of working from home, and we frequently do, but we are in the office every day. We can do 6 days a week. We tend to not want to do Sundays, but simply because of the fact that the banks aren't open.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're an aggressive little firm, and we got some great people. So if you're an investor, for sale by owner person, or a really good realtor looking for a great relationship with a title company, or a lender who is desperate to have solid partners in the closing, you can count on us.
No, this is an awesome conversation, Bill. I want to thank you for hopping on today and sort of walking through. I learned a lot walking through some of these topics I had no idea about. What's the best place for people to find you and to find Victory Title?
Our website is really easy. It's victorytitlewi.com. It's a pretty comprehensive site. It has everything you need. Just have to thumb through the menu. It's both available on your phone and on your desktop. You can call us directly at 414-662-8001. Pretty easy number to remember. It's not the 588-2300 number from the carpet guys, but it is an easy number to remember.
Are those guys still around? Do they still have that number? They are.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, all over Chicago. That whole I was brought up my later childhood in Libertyville, Illinois. So we saw those ads as a kid all the time. I've been in Kenosha now for 28 years, raised our kids there. So yeah, we like Wisconsin, especially the taxes compared to
Illinois, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, this is awesome. And just for clarification for the audience, Wisconsin is the place of business for you guys. Are you anywhere out of state or Wisconsin?
Yeah. Well, we can help folks that are purchasing property in Wisconsin from out of state. We have several people from Florida, some people from California, a few people from New York, Ohio, Alabama, Tennessee that send us work where they're purchasing properties here.
Gotcha.
But we cover, we're based in Milwaukee, but we can work the entire 5-county region, and we cover all 72 counties. We've done transactions in, I don't even know what the count is now, but it's well into the 30 counties that we've done transactions in. I should probably monitor that and find out when we've actually done one in all 72, because I would bet that'd be a good feather in the cap.
We need to prospect the rest. Get them
Yeah.
in the right direction.
Some of those counties are very empty, though. I mean,
Yeah.
Nicolay Forest has a couple of deer out there that might want to buy something.
It's all hunting land.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the plan.
yeah.
Maybe that'll.
Some of those bears, they nowadays are climbing the trees, having a sniff of the hunters. So
They will climb the tree, won't they?
Yep.
I've heard those horror stories. I'm not out there, but I've heard those horror stories too. You think they just run fast? Nope, they can climb too.
And they're kind of scary up front, close, personal.
No, thank you. Only at the zoo for this guy, please.
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, this is awesome, Bill. Thanks again. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing some time with us. I think folks are going to learn
Absolutely.
a lot.
Absolutely.
And to our audience, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.